Just under 2 months ago, I released a video where I discussed the 10 greatest AEW debuts of all time, and little did we know what the promotion would have in store for us in the weeks that followed. Since then, All Elite Wrestling have introduced many top names to their roster, 3 of whose debuts have made it into the top 10. So let's get straight into it and look at the 10 greatest AEW debuts, well, so far. First on the list is one of the 4 groundbreaking AEW All Out 2021 debuts. We start with the Joker entrant from the Casino Battle Royal, Ruby Soho. Whilst it wasn't necessarily a surprise that she appeared, given that the crowd were already chanting her name before the countdown was finished, she certainly made a huge impact right off the bat. Following a short series of videos posted to her social media teasing her next move, Soho would walk through the tunnel with a genuine look of shock at the reaction she received. The fact she walked out to the Rancid song that she was named after made it even more special, a song AEW fans had been listening to on repeat in the build-up to the show. Ruby would go on to battle Thunder Rosa in the final 2 before winning a precarious exchange on the apron, shooting herself right to the top of the AEW Women's division. She earned a shot at the AEW Women's World title, and Ruby's destination was no longer unknown. Next, we have arguably one of the biggest names on this list, and one of the most famous converts to the AEW cause. WWE Hall of Famer Sting could have been forgiven for simply seeing out his retirement, having won countless world championships in some of the biggest promotions of all time. This was not to be, however, as the 60-year-old legend stunned the audience during the Winter is Coming edition of Dynamite in December 2020, when he appeared through the falling snow to stop Team Taz's destruction of Cody Rhodes, Dustin Rhodes, and Darby Allin. He stood emotionless in his familiar crow face paint, black clothing, and floor-length jacket before producing his faithful baseball bat to a rapturous reaction from the AEW crowd. The icon then carefully looked over the individuals in the ring before settling on Darby Allin, teasing a potential passing of the torch. Since then, he has aligned himself with Darby, wrestling 2 tag team matches, 1 cinematic and 1 in the ring, and has since ended any doubts over his capabilities following the spinal stenosis that ended his short WWE run in 2015. Luke Harper's near-decade-long run in WWE was a modest success, notching up 3 tag team titles and an Intercontinental Championship during his time there. As part of the Wyatt family, he was often involved in major storylines and was a well-liked worker by fans and his colleagues. Like many WWE mid-card talents, he had untapped potential that Vince McMahon either didn't see or wasn't interested in exploring, which is why there was a sense of gleeful anticipation when he became a free agent in 2019. Once AEW's Dark Order began teasing the Exalted One as their mysterious leader, the internet was set ablaze with speculation on who it could be. After 6 months of suspense, we finally had our answer, as Evil Uno stood in the middle of the ring and told us that he was here. Christopher Daniels and Kazarian came out to protest that the Dark Order was nothing more than a scam and that there was no Exalted One. The Fallen Angel was then cut off as the big screen displayed cryptic scenes and garbled speech. Suddenly, the image became clear: Brody Lee was here. Repackaged as a mesmerizing cult leader, Lee appeared behind Daniels and Kazarian before the Dark Order issued a heinous beatdown. It was an electrifying introduction that ignited a huge fire under the Dark Order, who had until this point became disconnected with the AEW audience. In one of the saddest tales in modern wrestling, Lee's debut was scheduled to take place in his hometown of Rochester, New York, but the pandemic caused the show to be cancelled. We can only imagine how big that pop would have been, and later that year he would sadly pass away, meaning he never got to work in front of a full AEW crowd. Eddie Kingston is a true success story of Tony Khan's anti-cookie cutter approach to signing talent, having gone from indie veteran to national darling in an unbelievable short space of time. The self-styled Mad King's resume is a veritable who's who of American promotions. Going from Shakara to CZW, PWG to Ring of Honor, Kingston has wrestled for them all. After brief stints in NWA and Impact during its later, leaner years, he finally made it to national national prominence at the tender age of 39 by answering Cody Rhodes' weekly challenge for his AEW TNT belt. Kingston's excellent mic skills helped make his debut not only memorable, but also one of the most genuine on the list. His speech detailing his struggles getting to where he was compared to Cody being born into wrestling was a breath of fresh air and showed everyone he was a genuine talent that was more than deserving of a place on the roster. Kingston's promo arguably earned him his AEW contract all by itself, capturing the hearts of fans and sending social media into a frenzy. Before his debut, Eddie had admitted to himself that his wrestling days were coming to an end, and after the pandemic hit, so was his wallet. So much so that he was forced to sell his wrestling boots to help pay his bills. Thanks to his AEW debut, he can now live comfortably for the foreseeable future. Since making his wrestling debut in the year 2000, KENTA would go on to make a name for himself in All Japan Pro-Wrestling, Pro-Wrestling Noah, and Ring of Honor before signing a full-time contract with WWE in 2014. The hard-hitting striker worked under the new name Hideo Itami and would spend the next 5 years with the company, but struggled to find a consistent role. He was eventually granted his release in 2019. He soon signed for New Japan Pro-Wrestling and received an immediate push as the never openweight champion. Following his reign, he picked up the IWGP United States #1 contender briefcase, and after calling out IWGP United States champion Jon Moxley for months on end during the champion's hiatus from New Japan, KENTA took matters into his own hands. After a hectic 6-man tag main event on Dynamite, a masked figure blindsided the former AEW champion before revealing his identity, then dropping his foe with a go to sleep. Not only was this an excellent debut, it broke down the forbidden door between New Japan Pro-Wrestling and All Elite Wrestling, which many felt was closed forever when several key New Japan stars left to start the Jacksonville promotion. NJPW's new management saw the benefits of the partnership, and KENTA's debut was the catalyst for an exciting era in pro wrestling. After a long and decorated career on the independents as Tommy End, the sinister Dutchman was signed to NXT in 2016. Rechristened Aleister Black, he had 3 successful years on the developmental brand before finally reaching the main roster in February 2019. WWE's creative struggled to find a role for him as he languished on the mid-card until his 2021 release. Having been released on June 2nd, the newly named MALAKAI Black made an appearance on the July 7th episode of AEW Dynamite, exactly 30 days after becoming a free agent. Following technical issues that caused a blackout in the arena during the QT Marshall Cody Rhodes strap match earlier in the night, Black aptly appeared out of the second blackout of the night to attack Cody and Arn Anderson before skulking to the back. What made the debut even more shocking was the fact that it happened so soon after his release. It has since been revealed that WWE had failed to update Black's non-compete clause in his contract when moving him from NXT to Raw, which meant Black's deal had the 30-day non-compete clause usually reserved for developmental talent rather than the typical 90 days. This allowed him to make a seamless switch from one promotion to the other whilst retaining his buzz and eliminating the cool-off period that WWE wrestlers usually endure. And quickly, just before we continue, make sure you drop a like on the video as it helps me out a lot, and make sure you subscribe with notifications turned on so you don't miss any upcoming wrestling content as we head, hopefully, towards 100,000 subscribers. But now, let's press play on the video. Now let's go back to one of the most historic wrestling events of the modern era, that being AEW All Out 2021. The rumor mill had been swirling ever since Adam Cole's WWE contract had came to an end just days prior, and the decision on his future was yet to be known. It had been reported that Vince McMahon was keen to retain his services, with creative plans in place to bring him up to the main roster. That's if a new contract could be agreed. However, Cole instead decided that his next path would lead him to All Elite Elite Wrestling, joining his girlfriend Britt Baker on the roster. All Out closed with AEW champion Kenny Omega bragging that he had no competition left after seeing off Christian Cage in the main event. He and the Elite were interrupted by a face from the past, as Cole would walk to the ring to seemingly confront the champion, but it was all a ruse after he superkicked a recovering Jungle Boy to side with his old friends. This swerve would perfectly set up yet another debut, this time someone the fans were expecting. Bryan Danielson, the former Daniel Bryan, had been a free agent since May of 2021, following his appearance in the main event of WrestleMania. This led to fans thinking up some dream scenarios if he were to explore his options outside of WWE. Whilst at first this did seem somewhat unlikely, reports began to emerge in July of the same year that he was in fact now AEW bound with a contract said to have been in place. After Adam Cole joined the Elite at the end of All Out, AEW champion Kenny Omega would continue to brag that nobody is on his level. This before Bryan Danielson's music would hit. He made his way to the ring to help the Jurassic Express and Christian Cage after a beatdown from the villainous faction, turning the tide and clearing the ring. There is few more popular wrestlers in the business today than Bryan, and his debut in AEW will no doubt help take the promotion forward as they look to cement themselves as the hottest professional wrestling product on the planet. The wrestler once known as Dean Ambrose had been a top WWE guy for years, but in late 2019 was beginning to lose some steam. Moxley's unhappiness at WWE Creative was a poorly kept secret, and he had long been yearning to go back to the freedom he had enjoyed on the independent scene during his non-PG days as Jon Moxley. After his WWE contract expired on April 30th, 2019, a video appeared on his Twitter account, which was now rebranded to his former persona. The video showed Moxley breaking out of prison, a clear metaphor for his release from the shackles of WWE Creative. The question was, where was he escaping to? Mere weeks later, Moxley turned the wrestling world on its head at the first AEW pay-per-view, Double or Nothing. The debut itself was truly one of the most heart-racing moments in modern wrestling history, as he burst through the Las Vegas crowd to attack Chris Jericho and Kenny Omega before throwing the latter off the casino-themed stage. You could feel his passion bursting through the screen, and finally, the real Jon Moxley was back. This kick-started his feud with Kenny Omega that months earlier could only have been dreamt up by the most creative of fantasy bookers. And finally, in the older version of this list, I said it was difficult to see anybody topping Jon Moxley's AEW debut anytime soon, and boy, was I wrong. In mid-June, word began to spread that CM Punk was in talks with AEW to make his wrestling return after a 7-year hiatus. Fans of wrestling will know that this seemed impossible until that point, but in the weeks that followed, the scene was set for one of the most shocking of shock debuts. The United Center, AEW Rampage, The First Dance, a homage to fellow Chicago legend Michael Jordan, the occasion couldn't have been more perfect. Despite his appearance never officially being confirmed, AEW had broken their attendance record on the rumor alone, which shows the sheer magnitude of what the crowd were about to witness that day. The broadcast started with CM Punk chants filling the arena before Cult of Personality hit and the roof came off the building. Words cannot even describe the electricity in the air as Punk made his way out to the ramp. He would drop to his knees with a tear in his eye as he realized that he had made the right decision. This moment was truly lightning in a bottle, and this time I mean it when I say this will never be topped, not just in AEW, but in wrestling altogether. And before you go, make sure you check out my video where I discuss 10 CM Punk dream matches in AEW.